Welcome to the CEO of Destiny podcast, where you will find the tools to fulfill the purpose of your generation and wildly succeed in the marketplace. And now your host, Andre J. Benjamin.
What responsibilities do business leaders have beyond their shareholders or core constituents toward the broader, country, the nation that in which they're in? Since we're talking about America,
so we went into this work thinking companies are just going to have to start stepping up and making whatever proclamations about all sorts of things that are going on in our society. And we kind of came out of it thinking with a more nuanced view. And I'll try to do it a little bit justice, but really, I mean, people whose interest is piqued in this, like, you're just going to have to read the book. Sorry. Yeah. We take a bit of a nuanced view, as I mentioned, to the role of business in our society. And I think we sort of sound the alarm of caution around just how powerful businesses and their leaders are becoming. It's not surprising that, Trump is from business. And frankly, if you talk about some of the sort of dark horse candidates for the next presidential election, people are also talking about people from sort of the business community, right? Whether that's Oprah or Jamie Dimon or, people like that. And I think that that's because, again, there is not a lot of trust in politicians, right? I mean, you look at, I don't know, someone like either J.D. Vance on one side or Gavin Newsom on the other. They have high-ish favorables, but they have very high unfavorables as well. They're very polarizing figures. And those are just two examples, right? I mean, that's true of a lot of people.
But they're major. I mean, it was surprising to people that, it's kind of interesting too, because I would think, and I know they're older and people would say, but even Mario Cuomo kind of had more of a centrist type view or the way he communicated. So you think about kind of Gavin Newsom is very polarizing. I mean, people who live in California, they live in it, and they would argue and they would say, meaning the people who that mass exodus they saw there. And then, J.D. Vance is part of this current administration, and people would say that they have their grievances there. So I'm curious to when you talked about, so in the book you talk about Friedman and kind of you talk about neoliberalism and kind of what the last 50 years is. We'll explore this in our next conversation a bit more. I wanted to dig a bit into that. So you talked about some of his biggest champions of it, of course, being Thatcher and Reagan. Why do you think Ronald Reagan was so strong on what do you think? In other words, what did the two of you see? Did the pendulum swing one way that Ronald Reagan felt he had to come in with a corrective nature and kind of go so hard the other way? Or do you feel that it was a natural progression, or was it something that was forced? What did you observe about his economic reality and why he was pushing Friedman so hard?
I think it actually ultimately started under Jimmy Carter. Right, which is hard for some people to, on the left at least, to maybe get their hands around. But the truth is, Jimmy Carter kind of liberalized the FTC, right? And so he kind of opened the door to corporate mergers and sort of these much more sort of larger conglomerations of businesses. Also, obviously, in the 70s, we had the oil shock, and people were very, very focused on prices. Right. And so it became an imperative to figure out how to lower prices. And the Friedman Doctrine, I think, was a convenient way for politicians to embrace something that felt like it was going to lead to lower prices. By the way, it did, right? I mean, if you look at sort of the effect of globalization, I think we would argue we went a little bit overboard. Really, a lot of people would argue that we went a little bit overboard, right? It's why the CHIPS Act tried to pull a bunch of supply back into the U.S. and supply chain specifically back into the U.S. But a lot of
that was daunting for people, Seth, when people realized in the shutdown, for instance, when everything happened, and they were like, okay, well, the medicine is in China, the machines that you need is in China. Like every single thing and so a lot of people were saying for the first time, what do we actually build?
what do we do here?
What vertical do we hold? It was weird. It's like, do we just export ideas and media? Do we export the dollar? Is that all we have? Is that all we have going for us? Or do we not make things anymore when there are capable people here in the United States that not only can make things, they want to make things, yet they're not exposed to that as a pathway for economic viability to live in the 21st century. So that's
Yeah. And by the way, it was imperative from a sort of political perspective to make some of those things here, right? I mean, it was a challenge when global trade slowed and then stopped that we didn't have access to medicines or IV bags and things like that, right? I mean, that was, I think, an awakening for people in our government. But back to in our society, back to your original question, like I think that's what kind of drove Reagan. And by the way, I think Reagan like really believed that like lessening the power of government. He said it very clearly, right? Government's not the solution, it's the problem. And he really believed that. And I think he also believed that if you created a more overall prosperous society, that enough of that sort of that goodness would trickle down, to use his term, to sort of everyone in society. And it turned out that really ultimately wasn't the case, right? That this theory of trickle down economics just simply didn't end up working. There needs to be more guardrails in society to create that. And again, this is, I'm saying that as someone who's ultimately relatively skeptical of government intervention. So I want to, I think we should be thoughtful about what those are. But you asked about the history, and I think the history, certainly Reagan and Thatcher were the big proponents of it, and it accelerated in the 80s. And then by the 90s, by the way, everyone was a neoliberal, right? Like, I mean, clearly Clinton was. Larry Summers famously, when Friedman died in, I think it was 2006, and he said, we're all Friedman. We need to recognize we're all Friedmanites now, right? Everyone believes this. And it was probably a pretty good sign that it was about to be over, because it turns out that when we get to a full consensus, it's often wrong, right? And what actually works well in our political system is this tension, this back and forth, which is a bit why I kind of like this moment in time, right? I mean, I'm interested in it intellectually, but I'm also just interested in it as both a consumer, but also someone who's passionate about the U.S. and our economy and society. That I think these debates make us a better society, and I think part of what happened under Clinton and then others, including Obama, is that we sort of took for granted that outsourcing jobs was good and lowering the cost of manufacturing was good, and we just needed to grow the economy, and we forgot about, it's like the Jeff Bezos joke, right? Jeff Bezos walks into a bar and the average person in the bar is a billionaire. Like, it tells you nothing about anyone in the bar, and we kind of got lost in that. This idea that if as long as the economy as a whole seemed to be okay, that we were in good shape, but we're really not. And there's some structural challenges right now to the U.S. economy, very specifically the debt that deficit, which is the annual
sustainable
deficit, and then the debt. And there's only two options here, right? I mean, we're three.
Print our way into oblivion.
We could do that, right? But
printers.
That's really, I mean, so what you mean when you say that is we would inflate our way out of this. And we could absolutely do that. Countries have done that.
Grow our way. That's what the.
Well, that's the only other option, right? We either default, we inflate, or we grow, right? And I think we make the argument for how do we grow better and in a way that more people are taking advantage of that growth.
Yes, so what do you say in regards to there are? So you argue that the big question for the next, well, actually, I'll say this. So one book, the question raised for me is kind of who sets, because there's language about it, and I love it. You said it in the opening, even maybe before the recording started, or maybe you said at the beginning of the interview, but just in regards to how you recognize that there are inherent differences in humans, that everybody, this idea of equality is not this amorphous glob of sameness. It's not just this idea that we all wear the same shoe, and we all, if we throw the shot put, we all get the same, we all get the same outcome. You're aware of that. You don't live in a bubble. So the question that the book raised for me is kind of who gets to sit in the moral high seat when we talk about equality, like, and what counts as fair. So who was given, like, who decides who's given back enough, and how people should contribute in a system where wealth and voice are uneven? So how do we legitimize who is defining these obligations and trade-offs? I know that's a pat question, but I'm trying to figure out from the vantage point of that, how is there a almost a communal accountability that is there that keeps that ongoing conversation, rather than it being that now kind of the power is shifted and we kind of have just given permission to say, now you're the new royalty. The politicians who were supposed to be public servants, we've now given that over to the business owner that can turn a profit because they're coming in with the same type of promises, and we see them ascending as some leader. What are your thoughts on
Yeah. I mean, look, these are ageless questions and they will never be ultimately solved, right? I mean, the nature of our politics is to debate exactly these questions. On the one side, it's where do we spend our money? What are our priorities? And then the other side is who has to pay for that? And we've both abstracted in terms of the complication on our tax code, which I would love to change. But we also spend money on lots of things that, I don't think we should spend money on, right? I don't know that the defense budget should be $1 trillion, as an example. And politicians and our political system is just not set up to make hard choices. And I think part of what happens when you ask people, so let's sort of generalize a little bit, when you ask people on the right, hey, we think taxes should be higher, part of their reaction to that is they think government spends money on the wrong things. Right. And that's part. Now, again, what they think government should spend their money on, its money on, versus what maybe some people on the left think it should spend its money on, are different things. And this is why we have elections and we elect different leaders and they have different priorities. And I think we need to recognize that it's both a feature and a bug of our political system, that it's kind of designed to be in slight gridlock all the time. And I think the framers thought that would result in better decision making. And I think fundamentally that's probably the case, but it is very frustrating sort of to be in the middle of all of this and feel like everything is being weaponized, right? You used some terms earlier that I think are just being used by, and I described it as grievance politics. I think a lot of these terms, woke and elite and whatever, DEI, et cetera, they're all being weaponized by people with a very specific agenda of when and how they want to spend money and how they ultimately themselves can benefit from that. But I don't think we get out of that. Like, I think that's just part of how our political system operates. But I strongly believe in what, MLK said, right? Which is that ultimately sort of the arc bends towards justice, right? Like, I believe we ultimately will get there. And I'm an American optimist, so I believe that we'll figure it out. But I also believe we can't take it for granted, right? And I think we need to be active participants in our electoral process. And what I sometimes say to particularly young people, I don't want to overgeneralize, but young people tend to be more disaffected on politics, who say, hey, all the politicians are the same, I don't really care. The way to change that is to get more involved. But I understand their disaffection, right? I mean, they feel that the system is rigged, but the way to have it not be rigged is to, stand up and force your voice to be counted. So that's a wishy-washy answer because I don't think there's really a good answer.
No, it's an honest answer because you're saying this is what the ongoing debate has been through the ages and will continue to be. And I respect that. I respect that rather than saying that this is a magic pill panacea. So question I have for you, can you, one of the, startling stats was talking about how people were able, there was a high percentage, I don't have the exact number in front of me, of people that were likely to earn more than their parents and how that declined. So I think it was about, it used to be, it would be up to 60%, and now it might be lower down to like 30% or something, that you're less likely to earn more than your parents as you grow up. That, in other words, the economy it's not on par for there being a growth. It's a diminishing of what we deem the middle class in America and kind of the careers that will be commensurate with building families and whatnot. What are your
Yeah, I mean, the millennials were the first generation in sort of the history of the United States where their chance they were less likely, say it that way, to out earn their parents. And I think you see it in a bunch of different ways. I mean, a statistic I saw recently was that the average age of a first-time home buyer has jumped up to 41.
Yes.
Right? I mean, 41, right?
Which was crazy for me because I was doing some hires and here I was thinking that as a starting salary for this person who didn't have any experience in this area, they had some skill sets, but they were just like, they just still were trying to negotiate higher. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, what? But they were saying how everything was so expensive. They're like, I can't buy
Yeah.
a home. Now I'm taking for granted because we've been homeowners for a while, right? Because I'm the end of X. My wife is the beginning of the millennials. And so I'm taking it for granted. Someone who's in their 20s, that isn't their reality.
Yeah,
Everything
at
is
all.
tremendously expensive. There it was 1940, 90% of those would have out earned their parents, but now it's only 50% of millennials will out earn their parents. That is a staggering. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is economic opportunity, right? And this is the dynamism that I described, the ability to increase your station in life. This is just yet another example of how that's gone away in our society. Young people, and again, I think this explains the rise of populism on both the right and the left. Why there are so many young people that are part of MAGA, and there's so many young people that say that they're socialists because they don't have a stake in the economic system here. They don't believe that they're going to sort of create the American dream for themselves. And I think we operate our economy at our peril if we don't pay attention to that. And I think as someone who is a capitalist, I describe myself as both a capitalist by nature and by job title. But as someone who is a capitalist, like I would like to see more people have a stake in that system. By the way, I have these conversations with my own kids, right? And who've clearly been a beneficiary of sort of capitalism writ large. My grandfather didn't graduate from high school, and we've done very well for ourselves here now 2 generations later. And my parents did as well. My dad has a PhD from Harvard. And so in one generation, his family went from his dad not graduating from high school to him having a PhD from Harvard. And that's like, to me, that encapsulates the American opportunity. And it pains me to watch it slip away. I have reason to believe, to be optimistic that we can regain it, but it's going to take a deliberate effort, and it's also going to take some political will, right? And I don't happen to see that right now. I'd be curious if there's a politician you would point to that you're like, this person is speaking my language, not even from a policy perspective, but from a rhetorical perspective. But I don't know that person is out there now.
I'm still way more fascinated. I feel the current Trump phenomenon is fascinating to me. I don't I'm I still feel that there's and he's going to be judged and scrutinized by his own base at a higher level because of the reelection. Yet I still don't feel that America is dealing with the dissatisfaction that is the very reason why you wrote this book. I feel you alluded to that with the foible that Hillary made, which probably cost her the election, of calling them deplorables, a basket of deplorables. And this idea of, and even like I said in the barbershop, of saying that there were people who were saying, I hate Trump. And then they went in and they voted the way they really did because they voted for the interest of saying, well, these things make sense. When I hear people say that, like, the man came in like a whirlwind and he spoke in a language that people could understand. And so I just think it's interesting that
and he gave voice to their grievance, right? And frankly, a lot of politicians basically waved their hands. The Hillary example is a really good one, and basically said, it's not real, right? When you call a bunch of people deplorables because they are saying, hey, I've got economic pain, obviously.
Want everybody to learn to code,
right.
That the same jobs, now a different set of jobs are being disrupted.
And I'm not excusing some of the stuff that some supporters of, frankly, all politicians say, right?
Sides do, but
what they said.
They're humans, period. And that's the point, is that I think the humanization of what you're bringing in the book, of asking the conversation of that, where do we move? We're seeing something slip away, and this is worth looking at. So I thank you for your time and this conversation. I'm looking forward to having more conversation about this. We're going to carry on a conversation that's going to be phenomenal in person.
We should mention that, Andre, actually. Let's talk about that, because that's on January 22nd for any local to the Atlanta region listeners. We're going to be at Poe and Company, and we're going to do
the city of Milton
event there.
And it's going to be a worthy conversation, worth having. We're going to have a good amount of people there, and we're going to have a great discussion about these and more. So I'm excited about the book. I'm excited about the work that you and Elizabeth are doing, because I think that we are in a problem, just like any relationship, when conversations stop. And the fact that you are going and you are meeting with people across, because we are one America, this idea of it being, the left, the right, it's the challenge and the problem. So thank you for being here, Seth. I look forward to more discussion. And any last things you want to plug? Tell people where they can get the book from.
Yeah, good point. Well, first, thank you for another amazing conversation, Andre. I remember our last time talking, and this is exactly what I expected, which is wide ranging and thoughtful. You can find the book if you go to our website, thecapitalevolution.com. There's a bunch of options for where to buy it. Of course, you can find it on Amazon or at your local bookstore. And appreciate people supporting our work.
Love it. Love it. Well, Seth, we're glad to have you. Thank you for another great conversation. And we are looking forward to the book generating more debate, more people engaging in this marketplace of ideas. So thanks for being here, man. Awesome. And take care until next episode. We'll catch up again, people.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do us a favor. If this was useful in any way for you, please go to iTunes and leave us a review. Reviews will allow others to easily discover the podcast. If you'd like more information and to receive a free download, rediscover your destiny, go to ceoofdestiny.com. Thanks again, and tune in next time.